behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
You hear people talk about the economy all the time. But what is the economy exactly? The economy is the flow of money between the people, the companies, and the government in the Cayman Islands. Why is it important to understand the economy? Well, just like the engine of a car, the better we understand the economy, the better we can make it run, and the more prosperous we can become as a community. The first important thing to understand about the economy is that the private sector is the main source of all wealth. Think about it. Most people work for companies in the private sector, both big companies and small businesses. But even if you work for the government, your salary comes from the fees and duties paid to the government by private sector companies and their employees. That's why we call the private sector the prosperity engine that powers our economy and drives the country forward. When business is booming, companies have more money to spend on salaries, bonuses, and promotions. Employees with more money buy more products and services from other businesses. All those people and businesses spending money generates revenue for the government, which pays for important services like education, roads, emergency services, and care for the elderly. So when the private sector is doing well, everyone does well. But when the private sector isn't doing well, like during a recession, the money dries up and everyone suffers. So when you hear people ask, how do we make our country more prosperous? The answer is pretty simple. Grow the economy. After all, you can't get more money from a system that isn't making more money. That's not economics. That's just common sense. In this video series, we're going to take a closer look at our economy to see how we can fuel our prosperity engine and how to make sure everyone benefits. For now, thanks for watching, and remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the second of 19 candidate forums for the 2021 general elections in the Cayman Islands, being hosted by the Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce in association with Foster's. My name is Mike Gibbs, and I have the honor of being the current president of the Chamber of Commerce. I will also be one of the panelists asking the questions this evening, along with Shamari Scott, president-elect of the Chamber. I'd like to begin my comments by welcoming each of the Northside candidates, Deborah Broderick, Justin Ebanks, Jay Ebanks, and Ezra Miller, and thanking them for accepting the Chamber's invitation to participate in this forum. Your willingness to appear on the same platform demonstrates to voters that you take the democratic process seriously and are ready to respond to a series of questions on the top issues that is identified by a recent Chamber survey. More than 400 responses and more than 200 questions have been submitted via the survey, and these will help to frame the questions for this evening's forum. There is certainly not enough time to ask all the questions, but we will do our best to cover the topics that have been identified as the most important to the Cayman Islands and to the Northside constituency. When the Chamber was established in 1965, the goal was to create an organization that supports, promotes, and protects the interests and welfare of its members and the wider community. Being nonpartisan, we have hosted forums every election year since the 1988 election. For 9 elections, we have provided members of the community with an opportunity to hear from their candidates and educate themselves before Election Day. These forums have taken weeks of planning and preparation, with all the credit going to the hard-working Chamber staff, and would not have been possible without the financial support of our sponsors, Foster's, Affinity, Bodden's Legal and Corporate, and DART, so a big thank you to them. I would also like to extend a wholehearted thanks to our media partners, Cayman Mile Road, Cayman Life TV, Government Information Services, and ICCI FM for agreeing to broadcast tonight's forum. It is the first time that we have live streamed the forums on the internet, and we hope that this new format will enable even more people to watch them in the comfort of your home. It is now time to begin this evening's forum, and I will therefore turn the proceedings over to Will Pinot, CEO of the Chamber, who will serve as this evening's moderator. He will explain the rules of the forum and introduce the Northside candidates. Will.
Good evening. Well, thank you, first off, for participating. The rules for tonight's forum. Each candidate will be asked a series of questions. You have 2 minutes to elaborate if you choose to do so. If you hear a ring of a bell, it means that your time has elapsed, and we'd ask you to conclude your response. Each candidate will be allowed to answer the question without interruption and is free to differ with an opinion or position of a fellow candidate during their allotted response time. Candidates should deal solely with the issues, and at the conclusion of the forum, each candidate will be allowed a 2.5-minute response or a closing statement. Seating positions of the candidates with us this evening is based on a random draw, and that'll determine the order of questioning. So I'd like to begin by introducing our candidates for this evening from Northside. We'll begin with Jay Ebanks. Jay Ebanks has years of experience in tourism and construction industries, where he has owned his own businesses for over 20 years. He has also invested in other companies like rental companies and affordable homes. In 2014, Jay was elected to the Northside District Council as a council officer before running in the 2017 general election. Mr. Ebanks has also been involved in the Pirates Week Committee in Northside. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you.
Justin Ebanks has held several senior positions in the Cayman Islands, including Director of Operations of Telecom Solutions and Sales Executive for Federal Express and Sales Executive for Federal Express. His community work has seen him serve on the Northside Hurricane Committee, New Business Committee, the Permanent Residency Board, and the Northside Primary School PTA. Welcome.
Thank you.
Deborah Broderick was Northside District Council Chairperson for approximately 1 year and assisted in district cleanups, Pirates Week float building, and District Heritage Day in 2018. She also assisted with renaming the Old Man Bay Playfield to the Ronald Forbes Playfield and the Bo Miller Beach project opening. She is presently attending the Truman Bodden Law School to obtain her LLB and is a member of the Student Society. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you.
Mr. Ezra Miller is a former leader of the opposition of the Cayman Islands, having been elected by his peers in 2017. He relinquished the post in 2018. Mr. Miller previously served from 1988 to 1992 as the Cayman Islands Government Cabinet Minister with responsibility for health and social services. Mr. Miller made his debut in national politics in 1984, serving as an elected representative of the District of Northside until 1992, and again from 2009 to present. His tertiary education and tertiary educational institutions he's attended included the College of Arts and Science and Technology, CAST, now the University of Technology in Jamaica, from which he graduated as a pharmacist in 1973. He also attended the University of Minnesota, qualifying in 1977 as a hospital administrator. So right this time, we're going to take a short commercial break to have our sponsors promote their messages. We'd like to thank them for supporting this forum, and we'll be right back with the first questions right after this short commercial break.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal, to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for the District of Northside. I'll now turn it over to the panel, Mr. Mike Gibbs, the President of the Chamber, and Mr. Shamari Scott, the President-elect. Mike?
Thank you, Will. Candidates, good evening once again.
Good evening.
Our first question, which I will start with Mr. J. Ebanks, will take this first question, and we'll move along the podium, is in respect of why you are running for this election. And the question is, what qualifications, experience, or attributes do you possess that makes you the ideal choice to represent the people of Northside? So, Mr. J. Ebanks, if you could respond to that.
Well, the reason that I'm running is because I think the people of Northside needs younger blood right now to get things done. Someone that's more active, more community involved with them, someone that's been there with them. I've had so many people that have came out to me and asked me to come out to be able to run this election again. I think I bring a lot of expertise from my qualifications being in tourism and running my own business. I think we need people that have been down on the ground before, that have known how to run their own business, to be able to step into this, because only them that actually knows those what they've done can help those that are out there.
Thank you. Moving to Mr. Justin Ebanks, if you could respond to that as well.
Thank you very much. After graduating high school, I've worked in the private industry at a professional level. So my whole adult life, I've had to prove myself to corporations. I've had to hone my skills to be able to progress myself, to be able to be successful in the business world. I grew tired of watching the disparity that grew in the community and the country. I got tired of the excuses, the rhetoric, the pandering that comes with politics. And I thought to myself that if you want to see change, you have to be a part of the change that you want. So I took my skills from what I learned in the private sector and the business sector, and I said, if I can adapt this and be able to integrate with people in the community and identify their problems, I might be a good candidate. I tried this approach in 2017. I was a young candidate. I came out. I started the foundation for being a leader for Northside. Over the last 4 years, I've had to grow myself. I had to mature more. I had to study more. And I had to identify where we went wrong. I had to find solutions. And I thought to myself that this will not be a job that one person can do. It has to be done with everybody involved. The whole district, the country has to be involved. They have to care. And if we can work together, we can make things happen. But it all starts with having the experience, the working knowledge of what needs to get done, and then incorporating the people's voice. This is why I used a quote from Woodrow Wilson, and it said, "The ear of the leader must ring with the voice of the people." And I think that is very important. This country has to get back to the grassroots, that the people is what this is all about. The people matter, and the people have to take part in this country. I'm a person. I'm a father. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm also a member of Northside, and the best way for me to help Northside is to get everybody involved and make sure that I can have solutions that I can roll out for them. And in 2017, I started. 2021, I plan to finish that project. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Broderick, if you could.
Thank you. Well, let me tell you all about myself. I started out working as a flight attendant for Cayman Airways after leaving high school at 17 years of age. And during that tenure of 17 years with Cayman Airways, I became a people's person. I was a go-getter. I have a lot of customer service experience. After working with Cayman Airways, I went into the accounting firm sector and worked there for a while. And then I ended up at the legislature. And I was there for 17 years, almost 18 years. After working at the parliament, I think the politics rubbed off on me. But anyway, during that tenure, I went back to university, to UCCI, and I studied social studies there. I went to the Civil Service College, studied public administration there. I did a one-year legal certification at UCCI, which kickstarted my law school. And now I'm in law school. I'm going into my second year, on to my third year next year to get my LLB. After working at the Parliament and being a clerk, sitting into the Parliament and listening to what goes on in there and actually seeing how people react. And living in a working environment where there are biasness, disparities, I decided it was time for me to retire from there. And it was time for me to give back something to my people that I have gained. After going to so many conferences and seminars abroad, Canada, London, House of Commons, Trinidad, I learned a lot. So I decided it was time for me to give back something for the greater good of my people. I have visited people in Northside. I have seen the elderly, some of them, how they live. And trust me, it is not good. I have family members that live there, and it's not good. So I am ready for the challenge. I am ready for the fight to give back what I have gained and to work for my people.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Thank you. The Cayman Islands and Northside are in a particular precarious position at the moment. We are currently enduring a COVID pandemic, which has had serious economic impacts on the country. The country needs experienced, educated, qualified, honest, hardworking, respectful leadership at this time. The country needs people that can lead at the local level, people that can lead at the national level, people that can lead at the international level. I believe that my unique experiences over the years, my academic background, my continued efforts to always educate myself, I believe that my lifelong involvement in the community in Northside started off in the United Church at the age of 10. Bodes good and gives me the capacity to deal with the issues that face this country and to come up with solutions that are practical, affordable, implementable, and that can serve the people of this country well. I have a track record of accomplishments, both at the local level and at the national level and at the international level, that I am proud of and that the country can be proud of. I am a respected politician locally, nationally, and internationally. And I believe that I am the right person to lead Northside and the Cayman Islands into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question over to you, Shamari.
Okay, so our second question has to do with local Northside issues, and I'll start with Mr. Justin Ebanks. What top social and economy issues in Northside would you seek to address during your fourth-year term, if elected?
Thank you, Shamari. Northside social issues stem from different aspects of the disparity that's happened in this country. Lack of education for some people have caused them to come withdrawn from being active in the community. You have people that are working and they're not producing enough income to take care of themselves. We have a situation in Northside where a lot of the younger generation now have to step up and take care of their elderly. When you have to accommodate the elderly and your kids and yourself under one paycheck, it causes a big disparity in the household. It takes away your ability to help yourself and grow yourself. So working on a senior citizen facility to help separate some of these needs in under one household is one aspect of freeing up the families in Northside. The second aspect of Northside is that we have issues with we're landlocked. A lot of people have wealth in land but can't access this land. So again, it holds away the people's ability to use their own equity to build themselves up. And this again takes away from home ownership, which is a deterrent. But I think if we can get Northside craft market established, it'll be a small bit of wealth for the community. It'll be a focal point to sell goods, crafts, and when tourism comes back, it'll be a focal point for the district. We have to grow slowly because remember, the district has had very little development for a long time, and we don't want to just overdevelop and don't capture jobs for the locals in the district. So part of training and education on entrepreneurship will help some of these problems. Creating more attractions and more district events for people to be a part of. You know, I've talked about establishing a district advisory council, which will work in hand with the district committee to drive new things that people can get involved with for fundraising and for developing our youth, providing means and ways for the elderly to be able to integrate back into society because they've also been left out for quite some time.
Thank you. Ms. Broderick?
I'm going to start with the elderly. We must remember that the elderly never did have pensions. That was not mandatory in their days. Now some of them are collecting what you would call an indigent stipend from NAU. But that is not suffice for the elderly, honestly. When I visit some of them, they have health issues. They have no one to help them. And I speak to a specific lady who had a shoulder replacement, and she can't even lift her arm to wash her hair, bathe herself, and there's no one there to help her. Of course, I tried with the community officer to go to Seneco to get her a helper. Seneco would not approve it, because basically they were saying that she was not bedridden. We also have where we need a mini market in Northside. We have people who want to sell their fish, people who want to sell their produce, people who want to maybe do a little jerk chicken. We have nothing there for our people. This has been long overdue. It needs to happen. We need to put more programs in place for our youth. Our youth feel like they're displaced. They have no belonging, some of them. We need to put programs in place for our substance abuse men, which we do have quite a few of them in Northside, unfortunately. But all of that, coupled with other things, Northside has a lot of issues. People just feel like they have nothing, no one to turn to. So we really need to deal with all those issues. Northside are lacking a lot of issues. There's a lot to be desired and a lot deserved.
Thank you, Ms. Broderick. Mr. Miller?
Northside has some ongoing issues with the elderly, but Northside elderly are not destitute. Northside is the only community that I'm aware of that has a weekly program for elders where we bring them out so they can socialize with each other. Northside has continuing needs in our primary school level, many of which have been addressed during my tenure. I would hazard to say that the 8 Mile Primary School is probably the best primary school in the whole island at this time because we've made a lot of improvements over the last 4 years. The PTA is very much involved in the school and its administration. We have a first-class group of teachers and teachers' assistants. The school is being managed very, very well at the current time. We do have a serious drug problem in our community that needs greater enforcement. I have tried many times. I have worked with the police as much as I can, but I am not a policeman. I can't enforce the law. But that is a huge problem. And the bigger part of the drug problem is the continued use of alcohol among the under 25 and all the ways that they are provided with free alcohol. I would like to see some greater involvement in people in the community in our youth programs. We have a wonderful youth program at the Pilgrim Holiness Church every Friday evening, which I support all the time. We have a wonderful youth program at the Church of God Church on Frankstown Road. We have a wonderful girls' brigade at the United Church. We have a boys' program at the United Church on Wednesdays. But these things need to be supported by the community.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Right. Mr. Ebanks?
Well, for me, I think some of the top issues in Northside, one of the biggest things is housing for the younger ones. That's something I would love to see is the housing development come into Northside. Second, I would like to see that we have the senior citizen home come back to Northside. It's something that we should have from 3 terms ago. The reason that I say that the seniors need the housing, because we have too many of our seniors right now that are in housing that are actually outside of Northside, that could be in Northside, being a lot closer to their family and friends where they could be able to visit them a lot more often. I'm probably the only one out here that's been advocating to put my district council together, but also to bring a junior council together, because I've met with too many of the younger generation and they feel that they don't have anyone to talk to. So I want to make sure that they have a stake at the table from now on to talk to their elected member so that they also can say that they have a voice and they have a stakeholder in Northside from now on. Our craft market is another thing that I would love to see opening. That's something that we should have a long time again also. It's been another promise to us that we never delivered on. It's time that we need to get these stuff done for the people of Northside.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to the next question, actually is moving from Northside issues to more national issues. And this question will be first answered by Ms. Broderick. Can you identify 2 or 3 national issues, concerns, or policies that you are prepared to address as priorities for the next elected government?
Firstly, the cost of living. That is one that I would love to address. And the other is the traffic. You know, we have a lot of traffic for the eastern districts, mornings and evenings. And another one is the education. There's still a lot desired there to be done. Do you want me to speak on each one?
Okay. You have 1 minute and 37 seconds.
Okay, for the cost of living, we know that there needs to be strategies and solutions. Starting with the business sector, we need to keep the economy competitive, because if we can provide a good environment for companies to create jobs with stimulus income growth, this will outpace inflation. We need to also manage the cost of businesses. In turn, if we simplify the process of businesses, this will pass on to the consumer. We also need to promote the consumer awareness, educate them. When it comes to the cost of living, we have to be cognizant that the minimum wage is only $6 an hour, which is not feasible to live in this country for no one. We also have to be cognizant that when considering duty-free items that are into the customs tariff law, sometimes when you go to the store, these are not duty-free. When speaking to like milk and ice cream and all that, it's not duty-free. Now, for the traffic, I must say that something needs to be done about that. I don't know whether they want to do where they have more carpooling, or they can actually do like a parking area for people to park in the mornings, take a bus service into town to alleviate the traffic. Sorry.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
I think the most serious national issue right now is corruption. If we do not stamp out corruption in this country is going to decay into a third world country. We need to get back to where people are promoted on merit. We need to get back to where people get jobs on merit and not on corruption because you know somebody. We need to get back to where people get benefits from government on the basis of their need and not on the fact that they know somebody. The fact that the Minister of Health has to sign off on some Caymanian to be certified indigent for health care is ridiculous and ludicrous. Another big issue that we need, which goes part of corruption, is jobs. We have to get the jobs that are already here. We don't need to create any more jobs. We have 25,000 more jobs now than we have Caymanians to fill. We need to find a way through merit to promote Caymanians and make space for Caymanians at the bottom of the organization so they can progress. We need to resuscitate Mr. Entrepreneur. When I came back from college, I had a job. I was on a government scholarship. I was bound for 6 years. When I wanted to leave government after I did my 6 years, I became an entrepreneur. Right? It's almost impossible to become an entrepreneur in Cayman now. We have to find ways to create ownership because ownership gives Caymanians that opportunity to grow wealth. Another big issue is access to health care and sorting out the health insurance morass that exists out there.
Thank you. Mr. J. Ebanks?
Well, one of the top things I think is education right now that we need to look into. And the problem with education right now is that we have 50 candidates running. If you ask all 50 candidates, each one has their own opinion on what education should be like. I think we need to come out and take that out of the minister's hand for education. And I think we need to appoint somebody directly to be more suitable for that. Similar like how we had Mr. Roy in charge of the college. Because every 4 years we go in, somebody tries to roll over the ball in education, right? That's my opinion on it. The next one I think is cost of living. Cost of living is something that we really need to look into. We need to be able to make sure we have a consumer protection board in this country to be able to protect the Caymanians here. So that we, again, when we're talking about, when Ms. Deborah was talking about price of milk and stuff are up too high and they're not getting passed down, that's what the Consumer Protection Board would be for. When we talk about health care, is the other one. I think that we need to look into going into a universal health care service, something a little bit different from what we have now. Reason for is because we need to bring better healthcare service here for our people. And when I look into the hospital that we have, I mean, I think what we need to do with our hospital is go into a private sector deal with our hospital so that we can get people better, affordable healthcare service in there, but be more accountable for it and put it in the hands of the people that probably knows how to run it. We already have the building already there. We just need expertise to be able to run that section.
Thank you. Mr. Justin Ebanks.
Education is the main point to what everyone has said tonight. You do not have jobs or entrepreneurship or anything else without education. Education is not something you pass on to someone else to solve. Education is not one single aspect of the whole industry of teaching. Education is something we have to define for ourselves, what's suitable for our country. We have young people who are not passing subjects that are forced on to the next grade, and they're not grasping the foundation of knowledge before they pass on to secondary school. We have to identify where kids are struggling. Through education, we can identify kids who have home issues, who have mental issues. Education is not one aspect of teaching. Education is a standard. We have to implement standards in our education system. We separated private schools and public schools in the 80s, late 70s. We took some of the good out of the schools. We have private schools kids competing with public school kids. They're all competing with work permits. The better equipped our young people are, the more they can take on the challenges of today's world. We have to look at education for those who have been incarcerated. We have people who have been locked up and have not had a chance to be able to ingratiate back into society because we have not taught them anything. What we can introduce is some more curriculum in the prison system to help reduce sentences but rehabilitate people properly. Our elderly need to be educated. A lot of them have been stuck without any use of technology, and COVID-19 proved that when they were stuck at home, having to adapt very quickly without knowing how to access technology. The cost of living in Cayman will be affected through education. Second of all, if we have a cost of living in this country that is established to be too high, the country has to have open dialogue between the private sector and the public sector to find ways to alleviate some of the costs. Some of these things could be like direct buying from other countries rather than the United States, which has a higher cost of purchase. Lastly, development. This country has grown too fast, too quickly, and we don't have the infrastructure to support development. Development cannot move east unless we have new land laws to open up the interior of this island to allow development to start to pass into the eastern districts to spread out some of the diversifications of business when they're all just congested in Georgetown.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Miller, I'll start this round of questions with yourself. This one has to do with aspirations, as well as how your skill set can best serve the country. Which ministry or position in the new government would best suit your skills and why?
Well, the ministry that would best suit my skills is healthcare. I'm professionally qualified in healthcare. I believe that I did more in the 4 years when I was Minister of Health to move healthcare forward, in spite of people like Will and the Chamber of Commerce. And I have never taken on jobs of which I don't have a knowledge base and a skill set to perform. I think it's dangerous for the country, for people who, because people seem to believe that being a politician is an easy job, you know. I can tell you, after a few years in it, it is not an easy job. And I can also tell you that if you go into a ministry and you don't have some experience, some qualifications in that ministry, you won't even understand the lingo in which the professionals talk to you in. You won't be able to represent the country internationally at any high standard or with any kind of respect. So I believe if I was given the opportunity to be a minister, I would want to be the Minister of Health and matters relating to healthcare. I do have some qualifications in social services, and I did look after social services when I was there the last time. I do believe I have a management and administrative degree, which lends itself to performing in any ministry. But I believe it is always best to have a grounding of some academic preparation in the specialization and skill sets that are in that ministry.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Ebanks?
For me, I would say it would be housing, planning, infrastructure, and agriculture. Reason those apartments I chose because that's all in my background. When it comes to housing, I have the 20 years experience into it. Planning, I know what a lot of the problems are in there. I deal with them pretty much on a daily basis. Infrastructure, that's just another part of it. Agriculture is something that I've always been in part of, so I know what the problems are in agriculture because I work along with them greatly.
Mr. Ebanks? The other Mr. Ebanks.
Education. I think that working on education in this country is going to be the way to steer us forward. Education is going to have to be revisited many times over because education will never be sufficient in its current form because the world is always progressing and changing. When we were younger, we were taught that tourism, financial industries would be the way to go. Everyone wanted to be an accountant. I studied accounting, I worked in accounting, but those markets are dwindling. And tourism, unfortunately, is something that has become a bit of a stagnant market for us because of the high cost in Cayman. But I want to start pushing our young people to adapt to STEM system and to new ways of learning to capture what's coming ahead. Technology and healthcare is going to be the new emerging markets in this country. And I'm passionate about getting our young people upskilled, trained, and qualified to compete nationally. I spoke a little bit about the incarceration systems that we have here. People pass through the system, they made bad decisions, and we didn't capture them in time to try to correct them and try to help them to make better decisions. When we don't capture people and educate people, they become the government's problem. We have young people who can't get jobs, they end up on NAU. We have people who make bad decisions, they go into the correctional system, they become government's problem. We have elderly who weren't taught how to properly budget and save, and they're not able to produce for themselves, they become dependent on government. Through education, I want to wean people off the need for having politicians involved in everything. This will help alleviate some of the corruption. This will help alleviate some of the problems we have with dragging our feet and pandering to people. Education is not just one facet of young people or old people. It's a transition through life. And I think what we haven't had enough of is open dialogue with the parents, the kids, and those who give back to this country, which is the private sector and investors. Open dialogue with these people so we can have succession plans for younger people to be able to produce up. Government has to have a succession plan so people can see where they have to progress, what they have to do to maintain the job above them. This all ties into education. And if we can get this right, we can also do it in politics as well, so people can pass on a political baton to the next generation to be able to steer things forward.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Ms. Broderick?
Well, it would have to be the Ministry of Community Affairs because I've done studies in social studies and I like working with people. I am a people's person. And I would love to assist the elderly to get the care that they need and also the young persons to get employment. I would set up a committee to assist with all of that. So social studies is where I'm at. Like I said, I love working with people. And after working with Cayman Airways for 17 years, I learned to love people. So community affairs would definitely be where I would like to be.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We've gone through 4 questions. We're going to take a commercial break and have our sponsors promote themselves. And they helped us out quite a bit, including Foster's. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back when we ask the number 5 and further questions of the candidates from Northside. Thank you for watching.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal, to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right, and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Foster's. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Here in the Cayman Islands, the private sector is the prosperity engine that drives the country forward. Just like a real engine. The better we understand how it works, the better we can make it run, and the better off we'll be. To help illustrate how our economy works, let's take a step back in time to when there were only a few thousand people living in Cayman. In those days, most people survived by fishing or farming for food. It was a simple, wholesome life, but it was a lot of hard work. Most people bought what they needed from their neighbors. As people bought and sold things, their individual wealth went up or down, but the overall wealth of the country stayed the same. In a simple economy like this, the only way one person could increase their wealth was by reducing someone else's. In order to increase the overall wealth of the country, one of our Caymanian ancestors would have to sell something, a product or service, to someone somewhere else, and bring that money back home. In other words, we would have to export something. In those days, our biggest export was labor. Men worked overseas or on the seas and brought the money home, thereby increasing the total wealth of the country. Although the economy is much bigger and more complex today, these same principles still apply. Every time a company in Cayman sells a product or service to a customer overseas, the overall wealth of the country increases. Once it's here, it flows around the local economy between the government, the people, and the companies and becomes a part of our society's wealth. The two biggest sources of income for our economy today are financial services and tourism, often called the pillars of our economy. Tourists come here and spend their money. So all of the tourism companies like hotels, restaurants, buses, Stingray City Tours that make sure our visitors have a great time are helping to increase the wealth of our country. Just like tourists, clients of financial services firms come here and spend money too. So all of our financial service companies like insurance companies, fund administrators, lawyers, and accountants that facilitate investment transactions for people and companies around the world bring money into the economy and increase the overall wealth. The point is, if we want to increase the prosperity of our country, the best way to do that, in fact, the only way to do that, is to grow the private sector. In particular, the companies at the front lines that bring the wealth here from overseas in the first place. In the next video, we'll talk a little about how money moves around the economy. For now, thanks for watching, and remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine.
To the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forums for the District of Northside. We'll move on to the fifth question, which deals with the cost of living.
Thank you. This question will be first addressed to Mr. J. Ebanks, and it's already been touched on briefly already by a number of you, but what strategies would you propose to improve the quality of life and living conditions for the people of Northside as regards cost of living?
Well, as we spoke about earlier, I think of cost of living again. I think we need to go back to where we said our Consumer Protection Board is one, not only just for the people of Northside, but for the people on whole of the Cayman Islands, right? One of the other things is too that I think that we need to look into is how we can make solar more affordable for Caymanians so that they can have a better cost of living when it comes to electricity and stuff in here. And that's something that I think the government needs to be able to get into, to be able to look into how we can deal with that in a way. When it comes to getting other things done for going into groceries, those that actually want to go into buying lumber, stuff like that, maybe we need to have to put some kind of tariffs in place or something at some point in time on certain products.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Justin Ebanks.
Yes, the strategies I looked at was one thing we can do is look to start to open up land access. Again, I touch on this because it's very serious. East and North Side have big land masses. The people up there are having situations where they're landlocked. When you're landlocked, the land is then sold a lot of times to big investors or wealthy companies, and we don't have access to that land anymore because once it's then structured and subdivided properly, the value goes up. We then can't buy back our own land. I looked at a policy to try to integrate a revolving line of credit for small contractors in the district that would enable them to be able to capture jobs for building homes at a lower rate for our Northsiders. We're seeing where 2 to 3 generations are living under one roof because they're unable to access their own equity to build a home. This revolving line of credit would be a small step towards helping build entrepreneurship and development for the existing builders in the community. Again, did pass those savings on to people for affordable homes. The second side of that, again, open up the land mass, allow people to have wealth in their own land. They could then sell land back to their family and friends, even give it as a gift of love, and they'll have something they can start to build on and work on. We were taught when we were younger, every paycheck you should buy a few blocks and put them down towards home ownership. Unfortunately, times have changed. We now have to preach to people, you have to learn to save and you have to budget. You know, providing the advisory council that I want to establish for Northside, I will be able to give Northsiders free legal advice, free financial advice through the advisory council to help build more knowledge and wealth so they can help themselves. We need to have more policies that wean people off of having to go to politicians for everything. So define more definitive laws that people can help themselves, not have to rely on someone else to get involved to help them. The quality of life in Northside would improve again through education because this will help aid some of our social issues. The term that's used in the medical industry is called internalizing the aggressor, is when people get disenfranchised and start to bully themselves. They start to give up. They feel they'll never get top jobs. Every job's a work permit holder. They'll never own a home because of the high cost. So again, through educating people on the options they have and building up their own self-confidence, we can improve some of the quality of life in the district.
Thank you. Ms. Broderick.
As I previously said, there has to be strategies and solutions to bring down the cost of living. Now, in the interim of this, the consumer must be protected and fair competition regulated and enforced. Businesses, starting with the businesses, like I said, we need to keep the economy competitive, promote competition, and we need to promote the consumer awareness. We also need to be cognizant that salaries of some employees do not go up every year on the cost of living issue. And the minimum wage, of course, is $6 an hour. So all of that needs to be looked into when it comes to the cost of living. Also, we know that the elderly never had a pension. We also need to put strategies in place to, like I said, educate our people on the cost of living. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Yes, thank you. Saying that one wants to reduce the cost of living sounds good politically. Hard, cold truth, there's not much any new government can do in the Cayman Islands to reduce the cost of living directly. We have already removed government duties and fees from most of the products. Those that we haven't removed it from, we reduced it on. For example, on building material, we reduced it from 22% to 15%. The cost of building material still went up. As early as 1985, when we removed the duty from water, every supermarket in town put up the price of water the next week. So it's easy to say I will reduce the cost of living, but I don't support any kind of government price control, except in the cases of those which we already control, which is the utilities, i.e. electricity, telephone, fuel. We need to improve our price control regulation over fuel because we need to be able to determine what the landed price on fuel is. But the easiest way, the people who are getting a good salary and the rich people are not complaining about the cost of living, It's the people who are getting a poor salary, who are getting minimum wage or below. The easiest way that any new government can address the cost of living is to double the minimum wage and to ensure that the private sector is encouraged and incentivized to give annual salary increases based on the consumer price index, as the government struggles to do. I have friends who've been working in the private sector and haven't had an increase in salary for 10 years. We can't do much about reducing the cost as it relates to the cost of living, but we should be able to do much to improve the income side, which will make the cost more affordable.
Thank you.
I have question number 6. This one has to do with tourism and reopening borders, and I'll start with you, Mr. Justin Ebanks. What would be your approach and timeline for the reopening of our borders to tourism? And what is your opinion on continuing to support the workers and businesses that have been impacted by our border closures?
Thank you, Shamari. We have science and technology already at work, trying to reduce the COVID footprint. We have vaccines going out. We have protocols in place to reduce the spread of this virus. We have to be realistic. This virus is going to be around forever. Just like many other viruses from the past, what we have to do is set up a plan, and it's going to be a phase system. What we identify is that certain countries that have this thing under control and have proper protocols will be able to open up to those countries faster. Countries that are struggling to have it taken at task will have to alleviate some of those countries at a later date. What we don't want to do is open the economy and cause an influx of this virus to spread back and affect those who haven't yet been prepared for it. The government can outline what avenues we want to open back first. We've seen that stay-over tourism helps a certain part of the economy. And during the flux and the flow of tourism, it does great, and it slowly weans off during certain seasons. So we can look at when we want to have that flux come back in to capture the best audience. The second side of that was obviously the cruise tourism, which we're not going to see for a while. So there's no need right now to just try to get cruise ships back in port. It's going to take that industry a while to build back. But along the way, we had to identify, that I said this from 2017, we had to identify the ways to move away from tourism as a main staple. Supporting our current struggling businesses who are catered to tourism is very important. If they don't survive now, then they won't be able to grasp and catch up when tourism does come back online. I think government needs to continue to find ways to structure and provide for these businesses so they don't tank, because our economy is our economy. We can't rely on anybody else to step in and do it. We have avenues here that we can steer tourism once we have identified solutions for timelines for quarantining, and again, the solutions with the vaccines being rolled out. But at this time, once we set things in place, they can be amended and changed. So putting together a timeline and a phase on what we want to reopen will be key to success, because we do have to have a small reopening for this country to be able to be sustainable.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Ms. Broderick?
We know that tourism is imperative for us. It is one of our main sectors in the economy for our people to make a living. However, the travel and tourism industry and government should continue to reinforce their coordination mechanisms to accompany the business, notably the smallest ones, and the workers. Government also needs to consider the long-term implications of the crisis while staying ahead of the digital curve and promote the structural transformation needed to build a stronger, more sustainable and resilient economy. We need to ensure safety measures remain in place as we gradually open, continue to prompt transparent, consistent communication. I think right now the government is doing a pretty good job of keeping us safe and not reopening the tourism industry. So I would agree that we should stay that way for now until this COVID crisis gets much better worldwide.
Thank you, Ms. Broderick. Mr. Miller?
Thank you. I don't support the reopening of the Cayman Islands to tourists except under two conditions. We have 70% of our local population, that is Cayman and residents, have received both doses of the Pfizer vaccine. And then at that time, I would only like to see tourists allowed who have also received both doses of the Pfizer vaccine or the single dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And I think the tourists should also have to have a negative test 24 hours before arriving on the island. We have been very, very lucky in this country in that through the government following largely Public Health UK, we have basically kept the virus off our shores. If we have 70% of our population inoculated and the only tourists that are being allowed are those who are also vaccinated, I think that's a fairly secure position. Because if we only have 30% of our population that could, amongst whom the virus could spread, if we do get an infection through tourists, we should be able to handle it through our medical resources on the island. Anything more than that, we could have serious problems of availability of medical resources. I think the same should apply to Caymanians. I think one of the things that the government needs to do right now is to announce that any Caymanian who has both doses of the vaccine can travel, and on their return, if they test negative, they do not have to quarantine. Because we're getting now, in order to get to that 70%, we have to find ways now to incentivize our young people in particular, and our middle age, and some of the older people who have religious reasons why they don't want to take this vaccine, to come out and get the vaccine. And I think if they know, if they have both doses of the vaccine, they get a negative test, they don't have to be quarantined, I think we will get where we need to get.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. J. Ebanks?
I have to agree with Mr. Miller a little bit on that. I think that we need to get to the stage where we get our population at least 75% vaccinated. And then we need to look into how we can open up our borders. I think we need to start with at least 10 to 15% of our hotels with occupancy, allowing them to start with that direction. But we need to be able to allow those that are coming here have to be able to be vaccinated and should have to take a COVID test 72 hours before they arrive.
Thank you. Our next question is in reference to a strategy from several years ago, the Go East strategy, which was to encourage economic activity in the eastern districts, including Northside. Would you support moving some government services and offices to the eastern districts? And if yes, what services might those be? And this question, I'll start with Ms. Broderick.
Absolutely, I would support some of those offices being moved to Northside. Right now, we have the licensing and breakers, which is pretty convenient. Of course, if we had it in Northside, it would be more convenient, but I don't think that's going to happen. We also have other offices that we could accommodate. We have the general registry. That would be great to have in Northside because everything that we have to do at general register, we have to go to town. And I'm trying to think what other offices we could accommodate. We don't want to overcrowd Northside with all of these offices. We want Northside to remain unique. However, there are other offices that we could put there that would accommodate all of us. So yes, I would support other offices being in Northside.
Okay.
Other government offices.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I also support a limited amount of government offices moving to the eastern districts, particularly on land that government already owns. For instance, on the Anton Borden Drive in Bordentown, government owns quite a substantial piece of land. It was earmarked some time ago for the new Hazard Management Center, 911, and I believe even a firehouse. Some of the things that we could move out there would be like the police headquarters. Really, the police headquarters does not really need to be downtown Georgetown. We could convert the existing police headquarters in Georgetown to the local Georgetown police station, just like how we have a police station, local police station on Northside. And that would also help with the traffic problem, because we can't bill ourselves out of the traffic problem. We have to reduce the reasons people need to come to Georgetown, because I don't care how many roads we build east of Hurley's, we still have Hurley's to deal with, and that's where the bottleneck is. So certainly I support, and I believe that there are other agencies in government that could move out. We could build a new outpatient surgery trauma center in Bordentown, which could serve the whole island.
Thank you. Mr. J. Ebanks.
I do support the Go East initiative. We should have actually been looking into that a long time because we've been talking about it for years now. Some of the offices I think that should be up in Northside. I think the tourism department needs to have an office in there. We have the Cayman, which probably is one of the biggest tourist areas next to 7 Mile Beach for the island. The NAU service, needs to be able to have one. That's one thing I have in my manifesto, because I make sure that our NAU service has to be in Northside. Our Northside people cannot no longer go and stand up in lines to see people and don't get any help. We have to have somebody that's there for them. So that is a service I think that needs to be there. I think the Department of Environment needs to have an office up that way also.
Thank you. Mr. Justin Ebanks.
Yes, this country is too small to think small. This question was government services and offices. I think that every government service, through integration of the network, should be available to every district. Why do we limit ourselves to brick and mortar when we have technology? DCI, planning, every government entity should be linked together in a network. Proposal I have for Northside, through the Advisory Council, would be to establish that they could come through the district office and be able to access every government service. Police records, birth certificates, anything you need should be accessible through the network. Offices could be set up and have satellite offices in every district. Let's not just pick on Northside. Let's not just leave East End out. Every district should have a satellite office that has the adequate paperwork, the adequate staffing, and access to the services. That is the most important part. If we do this, we alleviate traffic. Again, my big mantra is education. Let's teach people how to use technology. Let's move away from paper. We're getting a bit too stuck in our old ways, and we're not moving forward. Services, click of a button. The rest of the world is moving on with this. Why are we still getting in line at DCI, then have to walk out of DCI over the planning to get the same approval done? Everything should be networked through a proper government system. Services should be for everyone, and it should not just be stuck in one district or in one aspect. Satellite offices, services through the district office would be the key to moving us forward.
Thank you.
Now we come to question 8, and I'll start with Mr. Ezra Miller. And everybody mentioned education, so you should know there would be an education question on here.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Miller, you have the pleasure to start. What do you see as being the biggest hindrance to the education system in the Cayman Islands, and how specifically would you propose to address it?
I think one of the first things that we need to do as a country is to stop downgrading and bashing the public education system. I am a product of public education. The public education system is not as bad as we pretend it to be. I will be the first to agree that it always needs improvement, all systems. But we always want to compare the private sector run education and the private sector schools with public schools. And we always seem to believe that the public schools are, for some reason, always worse than the private schools. Well, I got to tell you that the private schools have their problems too, and they are selective on entrance. They can determine who comes through the door. In the public education system, we have to cater to everybody. So it's much more complex and complicated. But we have come a long way in public education. The greatest need in public education right now is for parental involvement of the community in education. How would I go about that? I proposed 8 years ago that we set up a local community board to manage the primary schools and the high schools. The primary schools in Northside would be managed by a local board from Northside. The Clifton High School could be managed by a local board with people appointed from within the catchment area, which is Bordentown, East End, and Northside. We have to get the churches re-involved in the public education system. There was a time when churches laid education in Cayman. The foundation of education was laid by the churches. For some reason, we use this Christian banner when it suits us, but we need to encourage greater involvement in the schools. We need to have the parents be more involved in the PTAs, more involved with the whole education system. As a member of the PTA of the 8 Mile School for the last 8 years, and now a member of the Clifton High School, it is heartbreaking, it is disturbing to go to a PTA meeting and see that there's no involvement by the parents in the education system. That's the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. J. Ebanks?
As I spoke about earlier, we have all different opinions on education because it's such a wide topic. I think everybody has that opinion because they want to see better for it, right? Again, I just think that that's something that we just need to be able to take out from the underneath the minister, because the minister should only be able to provide them for the resources that they need and the financing that they need. Put it into the hand of somebody that can run it properly, structure it properly, and that can be more accountable for it. That way we don't have to worry about somebody else coming in the next 4 years and trying to change the system. We also need to look into bringing our trade school. I read someone's manifesto that was from 25 years ago, promising that they were going to bring a trade school to this country. And we're still here. We haven't got much further from it now. STEM education is another one. I heard Justin talk about that. I agree with him on that. That's something that we really need to look into. But again, we all have our own opinions on that, right? And that is the problem with it.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Mr. Justin Ebanks.
The hindrance of education system in Cayman Islands is the system. We have kids who are not passing math at 9th grade and pushed into 10th grade, then 11th grade, then 12th grade. They never got math at 9th grade. They cannot go out into the world and work unless they're educated. 2017, Mr. Miller and I bucked heads on the same issue. That year, the graduating class of John Gray, 12% passed math. That is unacceptable in a country with this much wealth and it's this small. We must identify that kids are not getting captured enough attention in the classroom. The system pushes them through. When children start to get dejected from learning, they start to act out. They start to get less interested in learning because they don't feel that they're good enough. And we're starting to teach our kids to just give up and settle for mediocrity. A trade school is only going to be good if we teach the right trades. Let's talk about plumbing. Let's talk about engineering, mechanical. What about x-ray technicians and physicians and therapists? These are also technical things that can be taught at technical levels in a technical school, but they must have the foundation to start. If you can't read and write and you can't add, then you cannot function. The world is not here to be fair, but the government has to accept it's not the parents' fault, it's not the kids' fault. The government is an external parent to this country. If our young people fall behind, we have to pay for it. It is on us. So introducing a new system is part of it. The curriculum is part of it. Being able to identify children's problems, part of it. But education just doesn't stop on one hand. We have to make sure that kids have the tertiary education and they finish themselves off. More private school children go on to finish themselves off at a higher level of learning than the public school do. This is because of the disparity of income in households. Most Caymanian parents cannot afford to send their kids off to get that secondary enhancing education. Government has to look at funding education here for kids until they're completely finished. You have kids that go overseas, they have access to every amenity they need to learn. You have Caymanian children who do not have internet. How can you be successful if you're not given the right tools? Government should have education free from kindergarten to college. Barbados has a high literacy rate. It's 93% because they give free education from kindergarten to college. This is how you empower your people.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Ms. Broderick.
They always say education is the key to success. Well, we have an education system where I feel that the bar needs to be set higher in the public schools, because I know the private schools do have a high bar, high expectations of their kids. So we need to do the same in the public system. We also need to have a database set up in the public schools where when these kids have homework, a parent can actually log into that database program and see the homework that is there, whether they have homework or they don't. The private schools does that. And I know the public schools don't do it. When I asked my little granddaughter last week, do you have homework? No, Nana, I don't. So for parents to know whether a child has homework or not, they need that database program. We also have parental involvement that is necessary. Parents have, it is a must, it is a dire need for parents to get involved with their kids. Help them read, help them with homework, go to the PTA meetings, be there for them, no matter what it takes. We also have to get the student councils more involved in district projects, whether it's a cleanup project, whether it is going to an elderly person's home and assisting them with something. And I agree, we do need the trade school. Yes, we do need it because not all kids are academically inclined. And when we look at the prisoners, we have young prisoners in Northward that could actually go to that trade school, become an electrician, a plumber, that when they come out of prison, they have something to fall back on. And I mean, if people were to read the Yolanda Ford report, when that was done back in, I think it was 2009, where she interviewed kids about why they ended up in prison and how, it would break your heart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next question on the topic of the recently enacted Civil Partnerships Act. And I would like each of the candidates to give or outline their views on that particular act, the Civil Partnerships Act, starting with Mr. J. Ebanks.
What I think of that doesn't matter as a representative. It's what matters to the people of Northside. They're the one that's going to elect that person to go out there. And if I'm there, it's what they want, what I will end up supporting. Not what I want. I'm their voice.
Thank you. Mr. Justin Ebanks.
Yes, to actually answer the question, you know, around the world, this has been a sensitive subject for many. But the most important thing to catch from this is the Civil Partnership Act. This was not to identify people of the same sex having the rights to be wed in Cayman. This is about giving rights to people who have made that decision abroad, and they come back here, and they're due certain rights. We cannot take away people's rights just because it is something that's not our belief here. Unfortunately, we have to separate our opinions and ourselves and recognize that these people have rights, and you have to cater to people's rights. We're not here to promote it. We're not here to take away from it. We're just here to accept that these people have made a decision, and once they return to this country, they do have certain rights that they have to have, and it's just a part of what the world is moving on to.
Thank you. Ms. Broderick.
Well, you know, our Constitution has a Bill of Rights, so everybody has human rights. And when it comes to the civil partnership persons, I must say that this has been around for a long time. We lived amongst them, but we never discriminated against them. We knew they were there, but we still loved them like everybody else. I flew with them as a flight attendant. And I mean, we were just all one big happy family. Nobody discriminated against them. So we just have to accept them and accept it for what it is. We don't know why they're that way. We just have to accept them as our own and love them the same.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Well, my position on civil partnerships is well documented. I was probably removed as the opposition for a position I took on civil unions. But this was the right thing to do at the right time for the Cayman Islands. And that is what is required of a leader. You to always try to make the right decision at the right time for the people that you represent. I supported it then. I support it now.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We've gone through, I believe, 9 questions so far. So when we come back, we'll deal with a whole bunch of other issues, including environment, coalition, employment, and growth management, if we get to them. But right now, we're going to take a short commercial break. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal, to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right, and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
In the last episode, we learned about the important role of companies here in Cayman that do business with overseas customers and generate new wealth for the Cayman Islands economy. But what about all the other companies in the Cayman Islands? How do they fit into our prosperity engine? Every business in the Cayman Islands falls into one of three groups, or tiers. Each tier plays a critical role in our economy. The first tier is made up of all the companies that do business with overseas customers and bring money into our economy. Companies in this tier are like the gas tank of our economic prosperity engine. The more we have in the tank, the farther we can go. Although most well-known companies in this tier are in financial services like Butterfield Bank or tourism like the Ritz-Carlton, there are many other well-known Tier 1 companies doing business with overseas customers like Unit Registry, Health City, and all of the companies in Cayman Enterprise City. The second tier of the economy is all the companies that do business with other local companies, like IT and marketing consultants, or companies that sell supplies to bars and restaurants. These companies are also very important because without them, the companies they supply would need to buy their goods and services from overseas. So while companies in Tier 1 bring money into our economy, companies in Tier 2 help keep it here. The third tier is made up of all the companies that provide services to people that live and work in the Cayman Islands. Companies in this tier include supermarkets, dry cleaners, mechanics, gyms, doctors, dentists, architects, house builders, florists, and gardeners. These companies are important sources of employment and business opportunities for our people. And they play a really important role because without them, Cayman wouldn't be a very nice place to live. So to recap, Tier 1 companies do business with customers overseas. Tier 2 companies do business with other companies in Cayman. And Tier 3 companies do business with those who live here. Every company and self-employed contractor in the Cayman Islands falls into one of these three tiers, and they all play an important role in making our nation prosperous, helping bring money into our country, improve our economy, and creating jobs. And without them, the Cayman Islands wouldn't be the great country that it is. Thanks for watching, and remember to share this on social media so we can all help fuel the economic prosperity engine.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forums for the constituency of North Side. We'll now turn over to Mike for further questions or Samari. We'll deal with coalition.
So, Justin, I'll start this question with yourself. Many candidates in this year's election have identified themselves as independent. If elected, would you be prepared to join a coalition group, party? If yes, which of the declared political groupings would you be willing to align yourself with?
I got into this process knowing that I would have to work with other people in Parliament. This is part of the job. Negotiation, cooperation, key to success in Parliament. I'm an independent candidate in its truest form. I do it at one level. I have no committee. I have no campaign managers. I don't read speeches and scripts. I do this because I have it here and I have it here. Over the years, once elected, people forget that they were appointed by the people by a majority vote. I said to people in Northside, if I was elected, I would try to have a meeting with the people of Northside to outline the options that's going to be portrayed at that time. Currently, we have a lot of formations changing around. I'm not even sure who's working with who right now because the horse trading starts a bit too early for me to keep up. If elected, I will go back to the people of Northside, if I can, to have them identify what they see is the best option forward. If that is not possible, then I will work with the best format that will be put forward. Sorry, mouth is getting dry. We have to see who wins. This process is an election process. Every district will put someone they feel confident in working with. I will have to do the same. But again, I cannot make the decision now because everything is flipping around and I'm still not sure who is actually independent, who's working with who. So when the chips fall, I'll make a decision. But that decision will be based on who has the best to put forward for this country.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Ms. Broderick?
As an independent candidate, I would be willing to work with a really good government. Depends on who it is. Of course, I would have to get that feedback from my constituencies because, you need to know what they want you to do. So I would be willing to work with a really good government. Like I said, depends on who it is. Of course, according to my manifesto, what I promised my people in Northside, they would have to adhere to that. I would work with them.
Thank you, Ms. Broderick. Mr. Miller?
I have always worked with the government. You can't get anything done if you work with the government, and my list of achievements in Northside is so massive, it would be impossible to have done that. Working with a government does not mean agreeing with everything a government wants to do or simply giving up your principles of your integrity and honesty. I am not going to join any government that does not have the kind of principles and the commitment to Caymanians that I believe we all should have. But of course, you have to work within whatever system is there, right? And I'm quite willing to do that, but we must not confuse working with and agreeing with. We have so polluted and corrupted the process of a coalition government anywhere in the Westminster system here in Cayman and what we did the last time. Because a coalition means you have two groups who have joined. They may have come together and agreed on certain principles, but they caucus separately and they still maintain their individual positions that they campaign for and their manifesto, except on the areas which they agree. We're all still waiting to see that secret agreement that was signed by the unity government and the last coalition. And the people of Northside would not expect me to trade my principles of integrity, honesty, simply to get in power in cabinet. That I will not do.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. G. Ebanks?
For me, I think the people of Northside is looking for someone that wants to work part of the next government. I indeed would love to be part of the next government. Who that is going to be, we do not know yet. April the 14th, I guess by that night we should be able to know who is going to be part out there. But I am willing to work with them to get what's betterment for the Northside and for the better for the country.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question, and Ms. Broderick, we will look for your response on the subject of the environment. What do you regard as the highest risk to the Cayman Islands' natural environment, and what measures would you recommend to address this risk?
Well, the highest risk I see right now is the dump issue. That creates a lot of pollution. It affects our biodiversity. The environment is supposed to be, the environment is supposed to be kept for future generations. If we don't minimize all of this pollution and all of the groundwater pollution, the air pollution, groundwater pollution, we're going to have nothing for our children. So we have to mitigate all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
The greatest threat to our environment right now is overpopulation driven by overdevelopment. The majority of the development taking place in this country right now is not for Caymanians. It is for people that they intend to import to increase the population. This madness of talking about increasing the population of the Cayman Islands to 100,000 is going to destroy this country. It is going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. Over the last 10 years, overcrowding, importation of population growth has led to continued decline in the quality of life for average Caymanians and for anybody who comes here to live. So we have to protect the environment, but in order to protect the environment, we have to understand that overdevelopment, which drives overpopulation, is the greatest threat to that environment. We can have the best environmental protection laws in the world. If we bring 100,000 people into this country, those laws cannot protect the environment. So we have to control the development. I know a lot of people say you can't control development. In the government that I was a part of from 88 to 92, we controlled development. We had a development plan, we had an economic plan, and the two worked together. You came to this country as an inward investor and you could fit into those two plans, we welcomed you. If you couldn't, bye-bye. we was the government who put a moratorium on hotels on 7 Mile Beach. The idea that we're building another hotel on 7 Mile Beach in this particular economic environment is madness. We was the government that controlled the cruise ships. One day we had 7 ships come in to Georgetown Harbor. The next week in Cabinet, we said no more than 4. We have to control the population to protect the environment.
Thank you. Mr. J. Ebanks.
For environment, I think one of our biggest things right now is the dump. I think that's something that we need to look into. And I do believe the government's actually, of the day, is actually looking into how they can actually take care of that. I think we need to look in also to how we can reduce our carbon footprint. We need to actually start to push solar more, and there's no reason why all of our government buildings nowadays shouldn't have solar panels on them through there. That's another thing we need to look at too. We need to look at how we can reduce our plastic waste in this country. For too long, we've had too many people advocating for it, and we have not gotten any further with that direction.
Thank you. Mr. Justin Ebanks.
Yes, I'm going to start off by some numbers to see if I can help bring my message to light. 1955, the population in Cayman is just over 6,000. By 1985, the population of Cayman is just over 18,000. By 2005, the population of Cayman is just over 40,000. By 2015, the population of Cayman is roughly over 60,000. We've seen internet, we've seen a lot of things progress in this country, and development came about. In 1955, we didn't have Mount Trashmore. We didn't have problems with the environment because there was less people moving around this country. We have to identify that when the brick and mortar is dried and the population is saturated and the land mass is used up, you can't undo it. This country is for the Cayman Islands people. That population to date is still just over 30,000. We have to reduce some of the development we have on a large scale. It is destroying wetlands. It is destroying natural resources. When you have a country filled with too much people that are going through financial problems, you start to see reduction of natural resources. Conchs, lobsters, fish, crabs, they're all marketable. People who are hurting reach out and take these natural resources to source funds for themselves. So by reducing development on a large scale and also being able to streamline the population, we can help reduce some of the effects on our environment. We have to have a better waste management system, and that will come from development. You have to be able to catch trash early and separate it. Biodegradables, plastics, we've all heard the rhetoric about the environment, yet we still use plastic cups and styrofoam plates because it's convenient. But less people using those will have less impact on the environment. And last but not least, we have to remember that education teaches a lot of these things to people as well on how to properly prepare to keep the environment safe as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller, starting the next round of questions with yourself. Another hot topic, employment. What is your view about work and the current priority of employing Caymanians? Would you propose any changes to the current system? If yes, what would you recommend?
I think the current system needs a lot of changes. But I think we have to be careful and do what my grandmother say, don't bite off more than we can chew. We have to look at the manpower statistics in the island. We have to look at those people who qualify to fit those different categories. And we need to strategically limit the number of permits based on the availability of Caymanians to fill those positions. We shouldn't go to the extreme of not have any increase in work permits, because then we may not have any growth in the economy. But we have to find a way to ensure that Caymanians who are qualified get the jobs that they are qualified for. The current system does not allow Caymanians who are qualified for jobs to get the jobs that they are qualified for, but it allows non-Caymanians to get jobs that they are not qualified for. Because oftentimes, I'll give you an example. There was an ad in the paper yesterday for some forensic assistants at a hospital. I have a friend who has a daughter who's just qualified in the UK in forensic science. So I suggested she apply for it. She said, well, Mr. Ezra, I can't apply for that because they want 2 years experience. Because Caymanians, on the average, are honest people. And because they want 2 years, Now they will probably hire somebody who doesn't have the qualifications she has, who has less experience because she didn't apply for the job. We have to put moratoriums on some work permits. We did that when I was in cabinet. We sent a directive to Immigration Department. There will be no more permits issued for condo managers. Within a year, every condo on 7 Mile Beach was properly managed by a Cayman. That's what we have to do. We have to be selective, and we have to be strategic.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Ebanks?
I have to agree with Mr. Miller in a certain way there. I think we do have to put some moratorium on work permits to make sure that we have Caymanians back in the jobs that they were. What we need to do is we need to look at those jobs and see what are the jobs that Caymanians are most welcome for to want, and start to work with putting them back there. If we do not look out for the Caymanians, we're never going to get anywhere here. They're always going to be falling through the cracks. We need to make sure that we put a hold on some of these work permits to get them back in there.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Mr. Justin Ebanks?
We can start with government because that is ours. We need to have succession plans in government. We've had people overlooked and unable to progress up the ranks in government itself. Succession plans will give young people the identification on what they have to do to earn positions as they move up in government. And when people can see when someone's going to retire or transition from a position, they then know when it's going to be available. This helps with employment. Our business license in this country don't stipulate that you have to hire a certain amount of Caymanians. This is something we'd have to review, that maybe through the business license, we can have a stipulation that for the footprint of the company, they should maintain a certain amount of indigenous Caymanians working in that company. This will help them fund scholarships, move Caymanians from one job to the next, and alleviate work permits. We have a business staffing board. Their job is to identify that permits are legitimate and there's no Caymanians for that job. Work is also doing a program where they identify Caymanian resumes and to see if the work permit that's being applied for is a transitional job or a job a Caymanian can move in. We're not putting our foot down. We don't have any teeth. This is our country. Businesses come here for a reason. It's profitable. But if it's going to be profitable at the cost of our country, then we're going to do two things. We're going to ruin disposable income in households, and that hurts the economy. If people don't make enough money, they can't spend it, the economy doesn't move. Second of all, there's no need to have permits on a long-term basis. We've identified years ago when we started to develop this country, we brought in a lot of white-collar workers to manage the jobs we weren't skilled for. The business staffing board is supposed to identify the transition of those permits away because Cayman should be stepping up. But the most important part to ensure that is there is education. Make sure people are educated and qualified that they can't deny them the job. Let's make sure that we're assertive and we show that we can step up and start to take over some of these white-collar jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Ms.
As they say, charity starts at home. Well, not in Cayman, it doesn't. We have young people who are practically sitting on the wayside begging for a job. We have young persons with degrees, honors, that cannot get a job. And that is disheartening, to say the least, in our own country. That should not be happening. I have lived it. I know what it's like with my own child. When our children go away, get their education, or whether they get it here going to UCCI or ICCI, they get their education, they get their degree, then we're told, well, they have no experience. Where are they supposed to get that experience? We should dictate to these firms, you are going to hire Caymanians and give them that experience. We have to put policies in place and enforce them. We have to be strict about this. Our young people are supposed to be the leaders of tomorrow. They cannot lead this country if they can't even get a job. Parents have to still look after their children because their children can't get a job. And that is not what we sacrifice to send them to university for. Now, government gives them the scholarships, but then it's contradictory because they don't have jobs for them when they return. They need to put a database in place with all of these students, all of their names, when they're returning, what degrees they majored in, and make sure that they have a job when they return. With all of these work permits, they must begin find a job for our children. I'm not talking about a filing job. I'm talking about whatever they majored in. That is where they're supposed to be. So we have to get that under control and get our children jobs. because when they don't get jobs, they turn to crime, and then they go through the judiciary channel, and they're sent to Northward. So it is up to us to do what we need to do.
Thank you, Ms. Broderick.
Okay, the next topic, actually, it's been touched on a little bit, but it's more in the area of growth management. And this first question will go to Mr. J. Ebanks. Is what is your view on the current level of population growth and development and the impact on the country's infrastructure?
Well, when we go back, we always say, who are we developing for? In certain ways, we have to slow down our development, because if we continue on the paths that we're going right now, there's not going to be anything left for those that are coming up behind us. We need to look into where we're going to for development, how we're going to push development in a certain way forward, where we don't have to, with the population that's so that it doesn't overwhelm the population that we have right now. That's how I would see it.
Thank you. Mr. Justin Ebanks?
Yes, I've been touching on this subject, and it integrates with a lot of what I'm working on in my campaign, and my manifesto outlines the need for opening land access to people so locals can afford to branch out and have their own homes and develop their own land. The population in this country already has a lot of disparities. We just outlined this throughout the night. Inequity in jobs, inequity in education. The development process here is not being identified for our people. The population can only grow so much before we lose control on it. The people of this country are naturally going to reproduce and create more young Caymanians. We have to prepare the way for them. The country needs to have a national strategic development plan in place so we can start to identify what we want to develop, what we want to sacrifice, and what we want to preserve. These are key essential components to making sure we don't overrun what we've started. Again, I spoke about the population changes over the years. We're still using a two-lane system. We've added more roundabouts. You can see them from space, apparently. But if every car is on the road at the same time, going the same direction, and they're all pulling out from sub-roads, it's going to have a constant flux of traffic. We keep developing and keep adding more spider webs of roads, you're going to have more deterioration in the road, more traffic, and less access to where you need to get to. So the most important part I talked about was having the infrastructure in place before we grow. Let's grow the infrastructure. We have parking in town of 2 parking spots for a company that has 10 employees. You have businesses that cater to the public that have no parking because of lack of foresight. We developed too fast and forgot to build the infrastructure before we developed. And we looked at history. This country came from backing mules up a dirt road, and that was sufficient at that time. And as we developed, we kept forgetting to put in place what we needed to develop with. So again, building the infrastructure, after the infrastructure is built, a part of the development plan will show what level of growth we can do with population and what level of growth we can do with development. But it has to start from that national development plan. So let's build the infrastructure and let things start to branch out once we have things in place.
Thank you. Ms. Broderick?
Development, who is it really for? I mean, it's happening in Cayman. You know, we are getting overdeveloped. We are overpopulated right now, I would say. And if we go to 100,000, Lord knows what's going to happen to us. But all of the development, with all of the condominiums that are going down, you know, these are condominiums that are not, our children can't afford those. We can't afford those. Who are they for? It's certainly not for us, for sure. So we have to be cognizant that sometimes our country can become overdeveloped. And when you look at it, this is not why people come here to see all of these condominiums. They come here to see a unique island. So we have to be very careful with the overpopulated country that we have and the overdevelopment.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
As I said earlier, the greatest danger to this country right now is this preposterous proposal to grow the population to 100,000 people. And you know what I found interesting is the same people and the same economic forces that are asking us to go to 100,000 now were the same people who in the 80s were asking us to go to 60,000. Exact same people. It may be one generation of the family down the road. And what do we have? We have the 60,000 people now, you know. What effect has it had on all of us? The quality of our life is low. Caymanians are deeper in debt. Crime is higher. Infrastructure is overloaded because there's no planning. If you look at the population growth of this country, if I live to be as old as my father was and he died, we will have doubled the population of this country 4 times in my lifetime. No country in the world can sustain that. Up until 2000, there were more Caymanians born than we were importing through status. Post 2000, every year we have granted more people status than Caymanians born in. That's a recipe for disaster for Caymanians. And there is no good that this country can get from going to 100,000 people. We have to manage it. But we can't manage it if the country is on a course that any inward investor comes here, we're willing to buy their investment into the Cayman Islands by giving them 30 or 40% through concessions to the cost of their development. If we have a company that comes here and they need the people of this country to invest 30 to 40,000 into their project through concessions, we don't need them. We don't need them. All that is going to do is complicate the infrastructure. And the very funds that we need to provide the infrastructure for this overpopulation, we're giving away today.
Thank you.
Next round, we'll start with Mr. Justin Ebanks. We touched on the elderly previously, but this one is going to delve down a little bit further. Elderly assistance. Would you recommend or support additional programs to assist the elderly population in Northside and the Cayman Islands in general? If yes, please elaborate.
Yes, these are the people that built this country. Our forefathers went to sea with no education. And guess what? They went to sea and they learned a trade. They brought it home. And their message was always build for the next generation. They sacrificed for their kids, and I'm a product of what they sacrificed to do. My grandmother brought my father into this world, provided for him, made sure his life was better so he could provide for me and create me. This country needs to have more programs for the elderly, not just because it sounds good politically, but I had to witness my 90-year-old grandmother getting bathed, and I had to help bathe my grandmother at 90 years old. That was not something an adult male wants to have to go through in life. Emotional. You have to take your home and convert it for handicap access. You have to put in ways to help these elderly people, not because they can't help, not because they want you to, they can't help themselves. When Caymanians once upon a time had less stress and less bills, they could give more to the elderly. But you cannot expect me to produce for myself, my child, and have to take my grandmother on board or my father on board because it's going to deteriorate my wealth, my household, my health. You have people in their 60s who have parents who are unwell and they're unable to help because physically they're not fit. Having institutions and facilities to be able to help these elderly people will also give back to the younger people. It'll be a focal point for us to have stories, history lessons, culture passed down, and what we can do is integrate the kids and the elderly. It helps with education as well, because a lot of our younger people don't know where we came from. You cannot appreciate what this country has done and who we are if we don't know where it comes from. To protect that knowledge and wealth, we have to protect the elderly. I spoke about a program to try to help the elderly learn about technology. And I taught my grandmother, that is still living, how to download Netflix. It was comical at one time, but she is now able to download softwares and apps. It gives us a chance to communicate because she can use WhatsApp. I get to see my grandmother miles away because we were able to teach each other. She taught me how to cook. I taught her how to use Netflix and WhatsApp.
Thank you, Mr.
So these
President.
institutions will help take care for the elderly and will also help grow the next future to be able to have a way to fall into when they grow into the older years.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Ms. Broderick.
I agree with Justin. Those are the people that sacrifice for us to become what we have become. So we have to give back to them and make sure they're taken care of. If we had an elderly home in Northside where these people could at least go and get the daycare that they need and be involved and be interconnected with each other and collaborate with each other, it would help them a lot. Also, the programs could be put in place there. They could do things together. You know, they could play cards. I just think that these people need more than just lying at home in a bed and the helper's there while the daughter, the son, or whoever goes to work comes back at night, don't really see the person. And I know this because my dad lived with me, and I used to get home at night. And, he's gone to bed. So I think that, yes, these elderly people do need more programs put in place for them to be able to see each other, be with each other, and people to care for them. They need the care, and I think we need to have a different system than cynical to actually get the care that they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Broderick. Mr. Miller?
Thank you. The people in Northside and the elderly throughout this country, the way this country treats its elderly is a national disgrace. I have done 6 surveys amongst the elderly in Northside over the last 10 to 15 years. At no time have any of them wanted an old people's home in Northside with live-in facilities. The great fear is that their children or grandchildren are going to sign them off into an old people's home and forget about them. What the elderly people in Northside want is more company. They want more opportunities to interact with each other. They want daycare programs like what we are currently providing at the Civic Center. They want to know that when they get medical needs, there's a system in place to support them. They want to know that they have an income coming in, which is allowing them to make decisions about their life, and they don't have to depend on handouts or to go begging. So we need to develop a system in this country, and we have to start from what does an elderly person need in order to live comfortably. And if we determine that's $1,500 a month, that's what the government has to provide. And we have to find a mechanism by which to fund that. Now, if we determine that's $1,500 a month, but a person has a little apartment that they're renting for $200, or they got a small pension of $200, then we only need to give them $1,100. But we need to be able to provide them with the resources that they can pay their own electricity, pay their utilities, feed and clothe themselves, and have a little disposable income for their own entertainment. And then we need to have programs in the district, at the district level, that allows the elderly to interact with younger people. When we have the school come across to the Civic Center to interact with the elderly people, it's just a joyous occasion for both parties.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Ebanks?
Well, I think all of us do agree that we need to have an elderly people home in Northside. I have to disagree with Mr. Miller on that one. I remember one of the biggest meetings I think Mr. Miller ever had at the Civic Center. It was packed. The people voted on which 3 different drawings that he had that day. And they voted that they wanted an elderly home.
No, they want a daycare center, not an elderly home.
Well, it was combined to be all two, right?
Oh, no,
Okay,
no, it
all
was
right.
totally daycare.
Mr. Miller, it was combined to be all two. I was out there, I was there in the public, and up to today, the people are still calling for it. So I don't know where your survey went to. But anyhow, we do need to look in to be able to have that established in Northside. We need to look into to make it into a daycare center for them, a place where they can actually go, interact, where the people at Northside can come and interact with them so that they have their friends and family there. It doesn't have to be somewhere where probably you talk about you just throw people in there and they're locked away from society. That's not what we're talking about. That's not the kind of program we're talking about. We also need to look into how we're going to help them, yes, with funding. Nobody can live on $1,500 a month. And we need to look up to how we're going to increase that for them.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks.
Thank you. Next question actually is somewhat related, is in the area of pension reform. Nearly $500 million has been withdrawn from private pensions as a part of the pandemic response. These withdrawals will obviously have will impact the ability of many persons in our community to have enough funds for retirement. What would your proposed solution be to address this future shortfall? Ms. Broderick, this would be you as the first to respond.
What would my solution be? Well, they shouldn't have let them take the pension funds up from the beginning. But it is what it is. I think that when they allow these people to take out their pension funds, not to be impacted by going to NAU in the future, they need to double up and let them put those pension funds back in. You know, just do a double of what they've been paying all along. Not the firm that they're working for, but they themselves put an extra in to try to make up for those funds. Because in the long term, they're going to need those funds. Otherwise, government, NAU is going to be impacted again. So to alleviate that, they need to come up with a solution and have them double up on putting back those pension funds into the system.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Pension reform is a hot topic, and it's badly needed. The solution to that withdrawal of that amount of money from the pension plan is not going to be easy to find. There's only one source that is going to come from, and that's from government in the long run. Because most of the people who withdrew most of their pensions now will not have time to replace the funds between now and retirement. So part of for government being able to provide those additional funds, because you're either going to do it through a national pension plan, which is a defined benefit plan, or you're going to do it through social services and NAU, which is going to be a more expensive route. We will have to go, in my view, within a very short period of time, to a national pension plan, which has to be set on a fully funded defined benefit pension. Because we have to decide what is a comfortable pension to retire on. The civil service has a good pension plan that is well managed, and the big objection to a national pension fund by the private sector is that government can't manage anything properly. But I would hazard to say, having done the public accounts hearings on pensions, that there is probably only one or two of the various pension plans in the private sector that are managed half as good as the government one. But you have to decide what do you need to be able to retire from, and your contributions have to be structured to deliver that over a period of time. The simple formula is most of us expect to retire at 60, that's 720 months. Most of us will work 40 years of our lifetime. So each monthly contribution, if we want to retire with 2/3 of our salary at the end, has to be 1/480th of your annual salary, of your monthly salary.
Thank you. Mr. J. Ebanks.
I agree with Mr. Miller there. We need to go into a national pension plan. But what we need to do is make sure that we change the laws where we can have our pension invested back into the Cayman Islands. It's been sitting overseas for too long, and it doesn't make anything. Never goes up, never does anything. We need to be able to make it where our government can actually use funding from the pension plans to be able to do large capital projects in this country so that you can actually see a return on your pension at somewhere down the line.
Thank you. Mr. Justin Ebanks.
Yes, thank you. The actual question was, these withdrawals will impact the ability for many persons in the community to have enough funds for retirement. The government should have given civil servants a drawdown from their pension. Let's be realistic. Those pension withdrawals kept the economy afloat. Let's use easy numbers. You make $3,200 a month and you pay 10% pension. That's $320 a month. 12 months in a year, that's $3,800 a year. If you work from 18 to 65, that's 47 working years. 3,800 into 47 working years would give you a pension of $180,000. If they give you $1,200 a month, guess what? 1,200 into 180,000 gives you 12 years of pension. You will then be at 77 and penniless because your pension only had 10% of your working earnings for 47 years. That is nowhere near enough. Those pension withdrawals gave you 2 years less of your retirement. But if you can't survive today, there's no point in having pension for tomorrow. These pension funds are not set up properly as it is. We can identify that the pension funds have to be done over. The pension funds also have our money invested. When that pension fund loses the investment, it's just the same as us drawing it out. The difference is I get the money, not the investor who invested it wrongly. We have too much high-risk investments for our pension funds. We need to reduce some of the risk. Secondly, people should have a choice whether they want their pension to be invested or not. It's my money, and it's not yours to do as you please. Let my pension stay where it is. On a third note, If the bank is going to foreclose on my mortgage because of disparity or loss of income, what good is pension if I don't have a home? The pension fund should be recognizable by the banks as a security to make sure your mortgage has something to back it in case you lose your job. So if you keep the pension fund in its entirety until I'm 65, I could be homeless, penniless, or half dead. The point of the pension is to benefit the person. I need to get to retirement in order to enjoy that pension. If the cost of living is too high, we can't afford to save. We'll have to rely on a pension system that's already putting us behind the 8 ball for retirement. Then comes NAU again. And actually, today, NAU is paying more than the pension fund. NAU gives you $1,500 a month. Pension gives you $1,200. I mean,
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks.
Balance the scales.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Miller, back at you. It's the last question right now before you wrap up. And this one has to do with constitutional reform. Would you support a constitutional provision which allows electors of a constituency to recall their elected member of parliament? Why or why not?
Absolutely, always have. Because I believe that if you get elected and you do not keep in contact with your community, you do not deliver the services that the community needs, you do not address the needs of the community, that community should have the right of a recall. And normally most recalls are 2/3 of the voting population in that constituency should be able to recall their representative because of lack of performance.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. J. Ebanks?
I do support a recall for members of Parliament, but I also do support a runoff because I don't see why somebody should be in Parliament that only gets 30% or 33% of the voters. You should at least have to get at least over 50% to represent them. So I think we should have a second runoff in case of things happens like that.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Mr. Justin Ebanks?
Thank you. Our Constitution will have to be addressed going after this election. We have to have a proper code of conduct and ethics in our Constitution. So when members of Parliament do cross a certain line and do have issues, this will come into effect. You should be able to recall members for crossing a certain code of conduct and breaching a certain part of the ethics that comes with Parliament. This country, is too small to have time wasted for agendas and personal grievances to be aired out in Parliament. Let's get back to the subject matter. You are appointed by the people. You are then there to represent them at the highest level because when you took this job, you understood that you have to be a professional at all times. You don't get to have bad days. So this will tie right into that code of ethics and conducts to make sure we capture the right people to do this job at the right level. You know, going forward with Parliament, we have to identify that we always need to have some form of measure and some form of accountability in Parliament. I also think the Constitution should outline that the district council should be done on a national level. We should have a national district council. That could be on the ballot for the next election. We should then vote for our candidate for the district, and then we vote for the district council leader for that district. The district council leader will be there to run the district council and to keep the MP in check. This is to assure they're doing their job for the people of the community. And this also creates a succession plan for Parliament because maybe this person could be a successor for the current MP. We have to start thinking of passing on the political baton to the next generation, and this ties into that. This country is too small to think small, but we've grown enough to have term limits, to have the ability to replace people, and to make sure they're doing their job for the right reasons and for the right people, and that's the people of this country.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Ms. Broderick?
I do recall I do support a constitutional reform for the recall of members of Parliament, because if a member is not doing their job according to what the people put them there for, to meet the people's expectations, then they should be held accountable and a recall should be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, candidates. We've gone through all the questions. We're now going to take a short commercial break. And when we come back, each of you will have 2.5 minutes to deliver a closing statement. Stay tuned.
The behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal, to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right, and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
When companies do well, everyone does well. Not just the business owners, but the employees, other businesses, the government, and even the customers. Seriously, to learn how, let's look at how money flows through a company. When a company sells its goods and services, they receive money, which is called revenue. That money is then split up and used in a number of different ways. Some of the money goes to employees. To keep it simple, we'll call this salaries. Some of the money goes to pay for products and services the company needs to keep running. Those expenses are called overheads. Some of the revenue goes to the government in duties and fees. And finally, any money left over goes to the owners of the business as profit. So no matter what products or services a company provides, it's like a machine that takes in money as revenue and spits money out as salaries, overheads, government fees, and profits. It's really that simple. Every dollar that a company takes in gets turned into one of those four things. Okay, so how does it benefit everyone when companies do well? Let's take a closer look. First, with salaries. Salaries are important for the economy because most people get most of their income from their employment. Next, government fees. In the Cayman Islands, the vast majority of the government's revenue comes from duties and fees paid by businesses. That money goes to pay for important government services like education, emergency services, healthcare, and infrastructure. Then we have overheads. Quite simply, one company's overhead is just another company's revenue. When a hotel needs supplies, they buy them from local suppliers. Those suppliers turn that revenue into salaries, overheads, duties and fees, and if they're lucky, profit. Some people think that business owners make too much money, but the truth is, the average company only makes 7.5 cents in profit for every dollar in sales. And that's assuming they make a profit at all. The other 92.5 cents goes to pay for salaries for staff, overheads that become revenue of other companies, and duties and fees that pay for the government services we need. In order to become successful, most business owners have to work extremely hard and take a lot of risks. If it wasn't for the ability to make a profit, the owner wouldn't have started the business in the first place. And if nobody started any businesses, there would be no jobs for employees, which means no salaries, no overheads to support other businesses, and no money from government fees to pay for our government services. So yeah, when companies do well, everyone does well. In the next video, we'll take a closer look at why countries need economic growth. For now, thanks for watching. And remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for the District of Northside. Now we're going to begin our closing statements, and we'll begin as the candidates were seated. We'll begin with J. Ebanks.
First off, let me thank you all, the chambers and all of your sponsors, for having us here tonight. It was a great pleasure to be here, to be able to hit all the topics that you guys have and that the people sent in. My fellow people of Northside, I have to say to you all, you know all of us. You know what we're capable of doing. You know who's been there for you all. What I'm asking for you all is that I think it's time for us to elect an action man, somebody that gets things done, and I'm that person, right? To get what needs done for Northside. So I want to, April the 14th, when you go out, Make sure you carry somebody with you. And vote number 2, J. Ebanks.
Mr. Justin Ebanks.
Thank you. This job is going to entail a well-rounded aspect of business, community, country. This job is going to entail public speaking. This job is going to entail a lot of work. And it's not going to be done just by the candidate alone. I will need every single Northsider, every registered voter, every non-registered voter. The people of this country, I will need everyone's support to bring about change and betterment for us all. I cannot do it alone, and you need to have representation in order to have it done. I will be your voice. I will be your champion. I will find and continue to build solutions for you, but I want us to do it together. This election, this process is just that. It is just a process. The end result will be how we work together, roll out the solutions, and create betterment for us all. In order for us to have a future, it has to start now. I'm going to apply new solutions to old problems. I'm going to find solutions for current problems. And we are going to do this together, and we are going to steer the way forward. I'm asking you all to please vote and support for me this election so we can have it done, so we can create it, and so we can have a future. I want to thank you all. I want to thank the chambers, and God bless everyone. On April 14th, the election day, please give me your support, your vote. We can do it.
Ms. Deborah Broderick.
Firstly, let me thank the Chamber of Commerce for having me. It has been enlightening, all of the issues and all of the aspects that we have to deal with for our country. There's much work to be done and policies to be set in place through Parliament. Northsiders, let me say to you, I am up for the challenge. I am ready to work for you and steer a new course together. Give me a chance and I will prove myself. Because when a woman wants to get something done, she's going to get it done. So I am asking for your support on April the 14th, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Mr. Ezra Miller.
Also, let me thank the Chamber for this opportunity. But more importantly, I want to thank the Northsiders for their support over the years. We make a good team. Let's keep this team together. We have accomplished much for Northsiders and all Caymanians. I am asking Northsiders to vote for me, Ezra Miller, so we can continue to cherish and improve our Northside together. Not often is one criticized for having too much experience and education for a job, so they need to be removed. Northsiders and Caymanians, you know you can count on me. I will continue to represent you with honesty, dignity, integrity, and courage. As Dr. Neela Panton said, and I quote, Ezra is the most erudite and eloquent politician in the Cayman Islands who is incapable of graft or dishonesty. Or, in the words of A. Chisholm, I endorse Ezra because of his principles of honesty, integrity, ethics, and hard work. It is also my belief that the district and the country need someone with strong political leadership and experience at this time. Or, in the words of Miss McKenna Anderson, and I quote, I support Ezra because he's honest, straightforward, a family man, and attends church, and because he cares about the seniors. Northsiders, we can be proud of our accomplishments and our record over the last years. Through our own brand of participatory democracy, in spite of the PPM, Unity, coalition government doing all they could to slow us down. When elected on April the 14th by you Northsiders, I pledge to continue to practice participatory democracy, to allow everyone to be involved in the governance of Northside and the Cayman Islands. Thank you all, and good night, and may God continue to bless each of us and our beloved Cayman Islands.
I'd like to thank all the candidates. Thank you very much for responding to these questions. And I'd like to turn it over to the President of the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Michael Gibbs.
Thank you, Will. On behalf of the Chamber Council and staff, I would like to thank the Northside candidates for participating in this evening's forum. I trust that the forum will help Northside voters to determine who to vote for when you go to the polls on April the 14th. I would also like to thank Foster's for their major sponsorship of the Chamber's candidate forums, as well as Affinity, Bodden's Legal and Corporate, and DART. Please join us tomorrow evening as we welcome the candidates for the constituency of Prospect, Austin Harris, Michael Miles, and Sabrina Turner. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you will join us tomorrow evening at the same time. Good night.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.